This presentation is on Joséphine Bonaparte, who was Empress of France and Napoleon's first wife. So some context. Louis XVI was the reigning king of France during Josephine's teen years and young adult life. He and his wife, Marie Antoinette, were known to spend copious amounts of money on parties, food, and renovations for the palace, essentially exacerbating the economic hardships of the people. And that leads us into the second slide, class conflict. With economic hardship, there obviously came a tense environment between the lower and middle classes and the nobles to live in. At the same time, the Enlightenment was still spreading throughout Europe, and with the ideas of liberty and the rights of citizens came along with it. So all of these points combined helped bring about the French Revolution, which was a major moment in Josephine's life and would ultimately push her into Napoleon's sights. Childhood. Joséphine was born on June 23rd, 1763. She lived and was born on the French island territory of Martinique, which is located in the Caribbean. Now, her birth name was actually Marie Joséphine Rose Tachère de la Pagerie, but she just went by Rose, and it wasn't until she met Napoleon that he actually started calling her by her other middle name, Joséphine. And so after he started calling her that, other people began to collectively call her by that name instead of Rose. Her family, they owned a sugarcane plantation on Martinique that was worked by slaves. She was also the eldest daughter in her family. She received a standard education for a girl of her family status for the time, but this would have mainly consisted of etiquette. So these two pictures show what remains of her childhood home and plantation. In the top photo, you can see the remains of the foundation of her parents' house, and in the bottom photo, you can see what is left of their sugar mill that has since been converted into a museum. First marriage. Alexandre de Beauharnais was a rich young army officer. Him and Joséphine first met when Joséphine's father took her to Paris at the age of 16, essentially in an arranged marriage to Alexandre, who was 19 at the time. They married at Noisy-le-Grand, outside of Paris, on December 13th, 1779. It was a tense and unhappy marriage. Alexandre was embarrassed of Joséphine's country-like manners, and in one instance refused to let her make an appearance with him at a ball Marie Antoinette was hosting. Alexandre eventually becomes an enemy of the Jacobins during the French Revolution and is executed in June of 1794. Joséphine was imprisoned but ultimately spared. So her children. Her oldest, Eugène, was born in 1781. And his sister, Hortense, was born in 1783. Marriage to Napoleon. Joséphine caught the eye of Napoleon when he was still a young army officer. He was 6 years younger than her, however. She agrees to marry him after he's given command of the Italian expedition. Before this, she thwarted his advances. They were married on March 9th, 1796. Now, when Napoleon is away in Egypt, he writes these passionate love letters to Joséphine, but she never responds. And if she does respond, it's mainly in lackluster letters, never reciprocating the amount of attention and detail that Napoleon does. At this time, Napoleon finds out that Joséphine is actually having an affair and threatens divorce. He was furious. But Josephine's children actually stopped them from getting a divorce. They convinced Napoleon to stay with their mother. Empress of France. Napoleon becomes emperor in 1804. And in the middle picture, you can see after Napoleon crowns himself as emperor, he crowns Joséphine as well. Immediately after this, Joséphine actually convinced Napoleon that they should get remarried in a religious ceremony because their original marriage was just in a civil ceremony. And Joséphine was unable to give Napoleon an heir, which made their relationship very, very tense, which ultimately led to their marriage being annulled in 1810. It was almost a mutual agreement for the betterment of France that they would have their marriage annulled and Napoleon would marry another woman. Château de Malmaison. Joséphine bought it in April of 1799, and it needed extensive renovations. It's located 9 miles from the center of Paris on the left bank of the Seine. Joséphine hoped to make it a cultural highlight of France. She built a heated orangery and a greenhouse. These are some of the photos of the chateau and of the greenhouse. Animals. Joséphine specifically wanted exotic animals to fill the chateau. She didn't want it to be a petting zoo type of environment. Some of the animals that her and Napoleon owned were kangaroos, emus, black swans, zebras, gazelles, ostriches, chamois, a seal, antelopes, and llamas. Roses. Her goal was to fill her rose garden with all known species of roses. She collected almost 200 different types. A book with paintings of all of the roses was published called Les Roses. It is believed that she held the first rose exhibition in 1810. She wrote the first book on the cultivation of roses. Her garden was the first to artificially hybridize roses. Joséphine died on May 29, 1814, in Paris of pneumonia. In the days before her death, she begged Emperor Alexander I of Russia to let her stay with Napoleon in Elba, where he was in exile. Napoleon was devastated at the news of Joséphine's death and refused to talk to anyone for 2 days.